Hey guys, it's Cal from the Lighting Doctor here, and today I just want to walk you through the 6 simple steps of how to go install your very own low voltage landscape lighting system. Always the first step is just choosing your lights. What kind of lights are you going to use? Is it going to be up lights, hardscape lights, in-ground lights, path lights, and the different ways that you can go and use those. So once you've got your lights selected, the second step is now you got to make sure you have a transformer that's the right size. And a really simple way to go and figure that out is you want to make sure you get a transformer that can handle all your lights. And the way you do that is if you add up the wattage of all your lights, so say you have 5-watt LED lights and you add up 10 of those, you got 50 watts. You want to make sure that you have a transformer that's at least 20% bigger than that, just to handle any inefficiencies and whatnot. Once you've got your transformer, we're going to show you how to go and start placing your lights, some easy tools, some easy tricks to do that, and then also just running your wire and some really simple ways that can save you all kinds of headaches down the road. So that's really the first 3 steps. After that, we get into wiring them, using proper wireproof connections, how to tee off on the line, how to wire each fixture, and how to make sure that those connections last for a long, long time. Once you've got that set up, then you want to go and actually hook your lights up to your transformer and give it power. Test all your lights out, make sure everything's working before you go and bury everything, which is the last step, is going and burying your wire. The beauty with low voltage landscape lighting is there's no code that says it has to be 18 inches in the ground or anything. You always want to check with your local codes, but for the most part, you can run it just through the grass on top of the mulch, and we're going to show you guys some tips on how to do that. So really 6 easy steps to go and install your very own low voltage landscape lighting system, and we're going to get into that. So in any landscape lighting project, really the first step is you got to figure out which lights you're going to use, and that's probably one of the toughest parts of landscape lighting. If you've never done it before, you don't always know which lights to use, where to get them. And that's where we kind of help you out with our consultations. You can always go check that out at lightingdoctor.ca. But basically there's about 5 main kinds of lights that you're going to want to use. One, and probably the most popular light that you're going to use for 70 to 80% of your projects, is something called an uplight or an accent light, or sometimes called a spotlight. A light that you can use to uplight trees, architectural features of your home, statues, features, waterfalls, all kinds of different stuff like that. The second most popular light to use is pathway lighting, path and garden lights as we like to call them. There's all kinds of different versions of it. There's literally hundreds, if not thousands of different kinds, but it's basically going to come down to really 2 styles. There's going to be more of a traditional kind of mushroom cap path light that's great for lighting spaces and garden beds and different areas where you have stuff all the way around it. And then your newer modern path lights that are more angled, more rectangular, and that fit with a lot of the modern designs. The next light that you're probably going to use most is a wash light. A wash light is very similar to an uplight. The biggest difference is that it has a wider angle and a much softer lens. It's great for small shrubs, small features, flowers, sometimes just giving that little extra light to the nice rock work or architectural parts of your home. But a wash light is a very popular light to use for anything that doesn't need a really intense light. The fourth light that you're probably going to use most is an in-ground light. An in-ground light is basically the same thing as an uplight. The only difference is you can just sink it right into the ground so it goes flush. So if you don't want to ever see that fixture, you just want to see the light source, that's a great light to use. Also, if you're putting it in an area like a lawn or something like that where you don't want to be having to trim and mow around, then an in-ground light is another great option because you can just mow right over that. And then the last light that you're probably going to use in a lot of your projects too is a hardscape light. There's all kinds of different hardscape lights, but I'm going to show you guys one that's very popular, that's easy to use anytime you have like a retaining wall, fences, decks. It's a nice compact little wall light that can fit almost anywhere and does a really cool job of lighting all your hardscapes. So really choosing those 5 kinds of lights. If you guys need help with your designs, be sure to go to lightingdoctor.ca, check out our free consultations where we can walk you through that process. So basically the first step when installing the lights is I'll just go around and place all my lights where I think they are going to go, and then I'll just go roughly dig them in. I don't need to make anything permanent yet because I'm not going to wire anything. I just want to get them in place so that I can start running my wire. I know where everything's going to go, figure out how I'm going to wire everything back to my transformer. But I don't need to make it permanent yet. So I just use my tiny little spade shovel. You can find it any home improvement store, usually in the garden aisle, and my trusty rubber mallet. And I'll just go and stake my lights in, screw them in, get them more or less where I want them. It doesn't mean we can't move them, we can't switch spots later. We just want to get them set up so that we can go around after and start wiring them. So I'll get my wires in there, and then I'm pretty much ready to come back now and wire that light up in a little bit. Hey guys, so this is our WS wash light that we like from FX Luminaire. Where these are really good, it's a great uplight with a much wider angle and softer lens. So it's really good for any small shrubs and plants that you see in front of me, any low textured architectural features of your house, statues, shrubs, anything that's smaller that doesn't require as intensive a light, that's where you want to go and use a wash light. All right guys, the next light in this project is going to be our trusty path and garden light. Now, it's probably one of the most overutilized lights in most landscape projects. People will put these all over their walkways, up and down their driveway, and it basically looks like they're trying to land a plane, and that's not the best use of these. There is a time and there is a spot for them, and when I like to use them, I prefer to use them more in garden beds and stuff like this, where you have some nice flowers that you can show off. Anytime you have like some nice rock features or anything like this or larger, path lights are really good because light colored materials like that reflect a lot of light. So when you have a path light, it's not a very overwhelming or bright light, but if you can use it against some kind of feature like a rock or something like that, that's where you can really get some pop. It's good to also use them in conjunction with different forms of uplight. If you can use them in between where you've placed some uplights on your property, you can create a nice balance of some uplighting and then some lower level downlighting. But avoid the one common mistake I see time and time again, not only because these are expensive and if you do it, it's just gonna run up your bill, but you're not trying to run a plane, you're not trying to create a landing strip, you don't need that many path lights. Use them conservatively, but they're a really good tool in flower beds, along some walkways in different areas like that. So one of the questions I get all the time about path lighting is really two questions. What kind of path light should I use and how far should I space them? And really that depends on what kind of path light you're gonna use. These are your more standard ones that most people have seen. The one important thing you wanna remember about path lighting is you don't wanna buy something that you can actually see the light source. A lot of the big glass dome ones where you can actually see the bulb are not your best option, because when what ends up happening is instead of lighting the features around it, all it does, it creates a big glare that all you do is you see a big light bulb, whereas that's not really the case. Whereas if you have something where you notice here you can't see the light source at all this is going to do now is light everything down below. So this is a pretty standard path light. This is about 15 inches high. You can get them a little bit higher too, where they come about 20 inches high. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna spread the light a little bit further. A lot of times people will think, hey, if I put a brighter bulb in there, I'll get more light. That's not necessarily the case, because really all that does, if you put a brighter bulb, it's gonna create a bigger hotspot on the ground. It's not necessarily gonna spread it any farther. You're more able to do that if you just get that light a little bit higher. So that's one way to get more out of this light. Typically a path and garden light like this, you're gonna space somewhere between 8 and 12 feet apart. The darker the area, the more you can space it. But again, it doesn't have to light every square inch of your pathway. It's more important when you're doing something like this, if you have an area, garden bed like this, and I wanna have 4 path lights in here, that I just space them out evenly, as opposed to trying to make sure I have enough to cover every 8 feet. So that's a good tip with that. And then the other path light that's really popular is the modern path lights. We can't keep these in stock. These get sold out all the time because it's a much more robust, we'll call it a much sexier light. I've been commented plenty of times on that this is just a really sexy looking light. Yes, you're gonna pay probably about twice as much for these, but they're a lot more material. They're built super strong. They fit that modern design, and they're a little bit taller than the typical path light. As you can see here, if I kind of place them at the same height, this one's a little bit higher. So again, what does that do? It's gonna spread that light a little bit further down the pathway or whatever area you're looking at. So when I'm looking at these lights, I'm usually spacing these closer to 12, 14, 16 feet apart. So yes, they're more expensive, but you typically need a lot fewer of them, and it fits in with a lot of your guys' homes' more modern designs. Okay guys, here's one of our newer versions of our in-ground lights. I'm really excited about these ones from FX Luminaire. The only difference is most of them don't have this cowl on there, which is a good thing, because if you're placing it in the grass, you don't want to have something sticking out that you could possibly get your lawnmower on. In this case, we're going to use it. We're doing this in a driveway area. So I just want to protect that light a little bit more, but they're really easy to install because basically, again, you're just digging a hole, you're sinking that light in there. If you have lots of gravel and sand already, say in a driveway area, then you can just hard pack that around the light, no problem. If it's in a softer area, sometimes bringing in some, some play sand to go and sink that light into is a good way too. It helps keep it drier for a light that's in the ground as well. In this case, we're going to be using it to highlight some of the architectural rock we have on the front of the garage here. Now, I don't know if you can see this in this video, but up above we have a coach light on the garage. And one of the things that guys always tell me is, well, I don't need a light to go and highlight that because that's what that coach light does. But it's two totally different effects. That is a very glary light, and that's a light that we almost never have on this property because it looks god awful from a distance. Whereas now what this is gonna do, from the ground, close to the building, not super far, probably about a foot back, it's gonna just graze the stone. And when you do that, what it does is it brings out all the little subtleties that you see here. It creates all kinds of cool shadows, and it makes it a very soft and subtle look. So I love these in-ground lights for areas like this where you have some nice architectural features. If you're doing it in a bed where you don't have to worry about vehicles driving over it, mowers going over it, you can always just use a standard uplight. You're gonna get the same effect out of this in-ground light as you will out of just a standard uplight that's sticking out of the ground. I tend to like to use uplights more if I can because I can play with the angles of the bulbs a little bit more. But when you don't have that option, you got to sink it in the ground. This is a great light to use. Okay guys, this is our other in-ground light. Again, we're using this to highlight some of the architectural features of our house. The reason we're using an in-ground light here is, if you can see, we got grass around us. So I don't want to have a light sticking out of the ground that I'm going to have to weed trim around, that I got to worry about hitting with a lawnmower. So with the in-ground light, I basically get the same effect that I would from that uplight, but I can sink this right into the grass, cover it up with dirt, a little bit of grass around, and then I can just mow right over it. So it's really no maintenance. Now, in this case, as you can see here, this is a pretty clayey soil, so it's going to be tough to pack this light with that. So in something like this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and I'm going to get some play sand, and I'm going to fill this hole with play sand, and then I'm going to sink my light in there. It's going to be easier to set it. It's going to keep it a little bit drier around that light too. These are sealed to keep the water out, but having that little extra protection with some sand is a great way to go and just add to the longevity of this light. And if you'll notice here, I'm probably not much more than, we'll say 18 inches to 2 feet back from the house. And again, like any uplight, this is pretty much going to be shining straight up, so it just grazes the brick a little bit. It's not going to be too much of a hot spot, and it's going to get light up to that second tier of the house and up to the peaks and the soffits where we want to get that light. Okay guys, so here we have our uplight. Like I said earlier, by far the most popular light, the light that you're going to use the most in most of your landscape lighting projects. But if you'll notice here, it's not just for trees. It's a great light to use if you're trying to uplight a tree. And some quick tips about that is, same as when you're doing a house, you don't want to have it far back pointing at the tree. You're almost always better off having it more upright like this underneath the base of a tree than pointing at the tree. It creates a much more natural effect, a much softer light. So that's a good rule of thumb. There's different wattages. The reason I like these uplights, in particular these ones, you can get them with something called integrated fixtures, where it basically has like an LED board built right into the light. The only problem with that is that if you've never done landscape lighting before and you buy the wrong light and it doesn't give you enough light or too much light, well, you can't go and just switch out that board. Or in some cases you can, but it's a lot of work. Whereas this, we just have an LED bulb that we can go and switch out, so that down the road in 5, 10 years, when that burns out, we can easily just go and replace that with any other LED MR16 bulb. So I like that. Plus, if you're new to the doing landscape lighting and you don't know which bulb to use, well, if you put in a bulb that's not bright enough, well, then you can always just go and change it for a brighter bulb. Same thing, as your landscape grows, and as your trees grow, sometimes you might want to put a brighter bulb in there. This easily allows you to do that with this light. So that's why I love using this uplight, but it doesn't just have to be on trees. It can be on architectural features of the house like this. We got some nice stone columns that we're gonna really be killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. We're gonna gently uplight this so it brings out all the little subtleties in the rock. But then what's gonna happen too is that light is gonna make it up to that top soffit, and it's gonna kind of create a nice glow that's actually gonna give us some porch lighting too. Even though we have porch lights here, they're very bright, whereas this is gonna give us a nice subtle glow, and this is more gonna give us the effect from the street and from the curb appeal with just some functional lighting up top. So again, why I really like this light. The one thing we are gonna do with this one, because it's close to a porch, an area we're gonna be walking by, is we're gonna use something called a hex baffle. All a hex baffle is this little aluminum shield that basically just goes over top of the bulb. So if you take this off, throw that underneath the glass, and then pop that back on, what that's gonna do is it's gonna soften the light a little bit, but more importantly, it's gonna deflect any of that side glare. So as you're walking around and by that light, less of that light is gonna hit your eye, and it's gonna be more concentrated on the nice columns that we have here. So that's something you wanna use anytime you're kind of lighting the entryway of your house or by a walkway or something like that. Hex baffle is a really good tool to have. And the last thing I'll mention about this uplight, when you are lighting some trees, a good rule of thumb, if you're using a 4-watt LED lamp that puts out about 250 lumens, great for trees that are 8 to roughly 15 to 20 feet high. I would say from about 25 to 35 feet, you want to use a slightly brighter bulb, closer to a 5-watt LED bulb. And then when you get into some really big trees that are over that 35-foot mark, you probably want to go and start looking at a 6-watt LED bulb so that you can really push that light into the canopy. But that's why you're going to use this light for 70 to 80% of the places in your yard, because it's such a versatile light. It does so many things, and that's the reason that we use so many of these year after year. Hey guys, so this is our hardscape light. This is actually a new one from FX Luminaire that we're going to be moving over to, because it's a little bit smaller and a little more compact than the LF wall light that we've used, but this is a great hardscape light for so many different areas. On retaining walls, it works really well because you can see they have this metal plate here that's nice, because usually you can just put this underneath that top cap of the retaining wall, and then that light just sits there and nicely shines down on it. They come in a bronze and a weathered iron finish, which is like a rock face color, so it really matches those. So most people have seen these kind of lights in those hardscapes before, but where they don't see them a lot of times, that I love using them for, is a different kind of hardscape, whether it be decks and fences and different areas like that. So on this project, we've got a couple uplights lighting our columns on both sides, and then this is going to become all a bed down below. So what we're going to use is we're going to use our hardscape light underneath the deck here that's going to cast light down into our flower bed area. Now there's a couple ways you can go and mount that. You can basically just screw it to the underside here, and that'll hold. And the nice thing is, because it's such a small compact light, it stays very well hidden. The other thing though is sometimes you don't always have a big lip like this, so you need to mount it under a very small narrow area, for example like in a fence. So what you can do is this plate also comes off. So now if we take that plate off, all of a sudden we have a super small, super compact light here. It's less than 5 inches long and it's less than an inch thick. So that's why we use these a lot of times on fences that have just a little lip that's maybe an inch or more, because then you can just screw it right to the top. And where I just unscrewed those holes, now I can go and I can actually just mount it directly to the underside of whatever lip I'm using. So again, it's less than an inch. It's about 3/4, just over 3/4 of an inch. So as long as you have that little bit of lip, you can go and you can use this light. And then if I'm using it on those areas, what I'll typically go do with the wire is I'll just go staple it underneath in the corners, whatever it might be. I would show you that, but my wife broke my stapler, so I got to go get a new one. But just hiding those wires, super simple, with a staple gun is probably the easiest way. Obviously, don't put the staples through the wire, but the wire is so thin that you can usually just staple it up there. But I love this light in so many areas. Here, we're going to use it to light the bed down below by mounting it to the underside of our deck. Another really good use for this light here is stairs. I see so many people do stair lighting, and what they do is they go and light every single stair going down, and they got this runway of lights, which is, in my opinion, a complete waste of money. Where I like using a light like this, either a couple ways. Sometimes, again, like I just talked about, if you have some kind of maybe you have a wood railing on your stairs, and you've got that little 1-inch lip that, again, this faceplate can come off, and this tiny little light can just fit right underneath that little ledge, and all of a sudden you have one light here, one light there. You have 2 lights that are lighting your whole stair area. So if you have a wood deck, I really like using a light like this there. The other place I like using it is on stairs. Now in this case, we have exposed stairs, so this is super easy to do because now I can just go and basically mount that light underneath. I'm not going to do it on every single stair. I'm probably going to have 3 of them, probably one up here, one in the middle, and one down below. But even if you have enclosed stairs where this is closed, if you look up here, again, we have this little lip. This is about only an inch. If I take this plate off, because it's such a small light, less than an inch wide, I can go and I can easily just mount that right underneath there and cast some light here. And then again, just having a few of those along the stairs is going to give me just enough light to cover the area, so I'm not going to trip on it. I'm a big fan if you can get it up high. You're going to spread that light further, softer. So if you can do that, do that. But again, a great light for hardscapes like fences, decks, stairs, all kinds of areas like that. The other thing I like about this new light, as opposed to some of the other hardscape lights that we've used, is this actually has a drop-in bulb now. So that now, as that light eventually burns out and call it, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is, you actually have the option now to easily go and replace that bulb in there with any T3 LED lamp. So that's a really nice feature to have, to be able to now be able to switch out that bulb. So the next step in your landscape lighting project is figuring out what size transformer. You've selected all your lights, you know roughly what your design is going to be, but now how do you turn them on? How do you make that work? Well, a real simple way with low voltage lighting is you basically just want to add up the wattage of all your lights. So if you've got a 5-watt uplight and you've got 10 of them, that's going to be 50 watts, right? So you want to make sure that you always select a transformer that it's at least 20% higher than that, because sometimes there's going to be inefficiencies and different things like that. I'll talk about the different sizes of transformers in a bit, but as a general rule of thumb, you always want to have a transformer that's at least 20% higher than the total amount of wattage of all your lights. In this case, on this project, we've got roughly 100 watts of lights. It's about 20 lights, and we're going to use a 150 watt transformer because our total wattage is 100 watts. We want to make sure it's a little bit bigger. So in this case, we're going to use our 150 watt transformer on this project. So along with placing the lights, once I've done that, I just want to go and run my wire. I'm not wiring anything yet. All I'm going to do is I'm going to start at my transformer, and I'm going to lay my wire out to each light fixture, just so that I know roughly how much wire I'm going to be using and figure out exactly how I'm going to run it. So I'll just tie it off at some point and then start walking it out. And then the only thing you want to make sure you do is, as you're doing that, at every single light, just go and leave a little extra wire so that when you get around to wiring, you've got plenty of room to work with, and then you can just go tie those lights in. And once you bury your wire, it's a really good idea just to leave a little extra wire anyway, because if you ever have to go do a repair down the road, or you want to move that light, 5 feet this way, 5 feet this way, well then you've got that nice extra loop of wire that you can go and do that with. So that's all I'm gonna do in this phase, guys, is basically just go for my transformer. I'm gonna walk my wire out to every single light, make sure I got lots of wire. I'm gonna leave my loops at every single light. Again, just making sure I've got lots of extra. If there's one thing I've learned, you can never have too much wire and you can never leave too much. It's usually the opposite, and you'll find that you're gonna be short on wire or you don't have enough. And it might not seem like a big pain in the butt, we'll call it that, but it'll save you so much headaches down the road. So lay out your wire, place your lights, and then you're gonna be ready for the next step, which is getting everything wired up. Okay guys, so here we have an example of a wash light, and why we're using it on a spot like this is, if you'll notice behind me, we got kind of a nice textured wall behind us, but it's only about 4 feet high. So I don't need anything super bright. I don't need to throw light way to the top. All I wanna do is I kinda wanna catch some of the plant life that's in this bed here, kind of create some shadows back on the wall, and then just gently highlight all the rock that I've got behind me. So that's a great example of when to use a wash light. One of the tricks that you'll find anytime you're using any kind of an uplight, whether it's an uplight or it's a wash light, is you're almost always gonna wanna shine it and tilt it. And if I was smart, I would have put the screw here on the other side, but you almost always wanna tilt it more upright than you actually think. So you don't have to keep it straight upright, but if you think you need to angle it like this, I would say probably take a notch or two like that and aim it a little more upright. And what that's gonna do is it's just gonna create a little bit of a softer light, less of a hot spot, and you're gonna catch more of the actual plants in the house rather than just the ground cover below. So that's a good tip anytime you're using any kind of uplight. Once you've kind of got that notched in, you can go and just tighten that up. The other thing I like about these lights is that all these lights, especially the ones from FX Luminaire, not all lights are created equal, but they come with a 10-foot lead wire. So I just talked about leaving extra wire in the ground. Well, now you got another 10 feet. Why that's important is your landscape's gonna change over the years. And what that allows you to do now is you can go move this light, play around with it, move it in the landscape without having to rewire it, which is a pain in the butt when you got to start digging up connections and you get the grease all over your hands. It's just not fun. So just make sure when you go to wire those lights, which I'll talk about in a bit, you leave that extra wire in the ground, bury it so that it's always there, that you can use it at a later date. All right guys, now the fun stuff, wiring your lights. I'm gonna recommend, if you're doing this for your first time, you're not real confident, start wiring your lights from the transformer. That way you can actually wire it in and you can test them as you go to make sure you're not making any mistakes or anything like that. Do 2 or 3 lights, turn on your transformer, make sure they work. If they work, great, turn it off and then keep going. It'll just save you some headaches of trying to find any shorts in the system. If you go wire everything and then you turn it on and it doesn't work, it's just easier to kind of test them as you go if you're not confident yet or it's the first time. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna go and wire our lights in now. So we left our wire out, we left our loop, we've got some extra wire. So we're just gonna untie that now, and you can see we got lots of extra room. Probably don't need all this, but it's nice to have. The nice thing with low voltage wire is there is no polarity, there is no plus or minus. It's a question I get all the time. If you want, go ahead, there's writing on the wire and you can totally do that. But I'm telling you, with the low voltage lights that we deal with, you don't need to worry about that. So how you get started, I've got my wire cutters. I'm basically just gonna go cut that line now where this light is gonna be going in. Then I've got my 2 strands. I'm gonna go split those wires so that I've got 2, and I'm gonna go do the same thing here. And then you only need to strip about, maybe an inch or so off of the end of those wires. I like to twist them tight together. It's gonna fit into the connectors better, so you'll see that in a second. I've got my wire that's coming from my transformer, so I gotta go strip those wires. And then I'm gonna twist those, and then the other set of wires I have is now I have the wires coming from my fixture. Now sometimes you might see some lights that have, you know, 2 colors of wires and stuff, it typically doesn't matter which ones you use. Again, there's no polarity that you have to worry about. So how you go connect these now is you want to make sure you're using a good waterproof connector. We like using the BVS2 water connectors for 2 reasons. 1, they're gel filled, they're super waterproof, and 2, they're really, really easy to use and really easy to install. So at every single light, I'm going to need 2 of these. So if you can see, there's 2 larger terminals or 2 larger ports on these, and then a smaller one. The larger ones are going to be for my 12-2 wire that I've got coming out from my transformer. So I'm going to have one of those wires going in, and then I've got my 12-2 wire that's going out to my next light. So I've got one of those wires going into the other terminal. And then that leaves me with 1 extra spot for my small 18 gauge wire that comes off my light. So I'm going to throw that in there. I'm going to push it all the way up into the gel, and then I'm just going to snap that tight till I hear the click, and now those wires are secure. So now I got 3 wires left. I got 1 more connector. I got 3 holes. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to put one of our 12-2 wires that's coming from the transformer. We're going to throw that into one. We're going to take our wire that is going out to our next light. We're going to throw that in the other terminal. And then lastly, we've got 1 more wire coming from the fixture that we're going to throw in the tiny hole. And then we're going to push them all nice and tight, snap that, and we're done. As an added measure, even though these connectors are nice and they'll snap those wires tight together, if you want to add an extra layer of protection to make sure that those wires are not going to come apart, I like to just zip tie my extra wire that's coming off my fixture. I don't want to cut it, I want to leave it, because if I ever want to move this light, I don't want to have to rewire this. So now I got 10 feet in any direction that I can go and move this. And then I'm just going to zip tie those wires together so that I can make sure that they're not going to get pulled apart now. I'm going to go do that, get it nice and tight. It's all waterproof. I'm going to go bury that now at the base of every light, which is something I'd recommend, because now if you ever have a trouble with this light, you know where to find those connections, as opposed to if you have those connections buried 10 feet away, well, you got to dig up 10 feet of wire to go find it. So bury them at the base, finish burying your light and all your wire, and then now you can move on to the next one. Okay guys, so we're still wiring our lights here. We've wired all our lights from the transformer, we've tested them, and they all work great. Now, I'm at my last fixture, and I don't have a wire that's going to another fixture. This is the end of the line. So how do I wire that last light? Well, a lot of times what people do is they'll take all the wires and they'll try and jam them all into one connection. But what that does then, all of a sudden it shorts out the system. And this happens all the time. All your lights are wired, everything's working, and then for some reason I wired that last one and now nothing works. That's typically the reason. So I'm going to show you guys how to wire that last light on the line. So just like the previous video, we still need our two connectors at each fixture, because we're still going to have our 2 sets of wire coming off our 12-2. So same thing as before, we're going to split those and we're going to strip the ends of that. And then we've got our 2 wires that are coming from our fixture, right? So now what we're going to do, and this is where the math gets tricky, but now we got our connector, we got 3 holes, and we got another 3, so we got 6 holes, but we only have 4 wires. So the way we go and wire that is now the wire goes into that one terminal, and this other one stays free, and then you wire your light into that connector as well. So in this last light on the line, you're only going to have 2 wires in the connector as opposed to 3, because we don't have another wire going to the next fixture. And then I've still got 2 wires left. I'm going to take my connector, I'm going to put the big wire in the big hole, the small wire in the small hole, and snap that tight, and voila, we're done. That's how you go and end the line. You want to make sure you still have 2 connections at every single fixture, even that last one. The only thing is, on the last one, you're going to have an extra hole. Sometimes what you can do is, say you know that you're probably going to put another light down the road, well, you can always run another wire out to the field and then just end it with 2 of these. But make sure when you do that, same thing. Say this was, we didn't know if we were going to put a light down here or add a light later. So we're just going to run our wire, our 12-2 wire down the line, and then we're just going to cap it off with this so we make sure no water or anything gets in it. But then when we're ready to go add a light later, now we can just open these up and then we can come and we can plug our fixture into this and add that extra light. So hopefully that makes sense. But again, last light on the line, you still need 2 connectors. There's just going to be an extra hole in each connector. Okay guys, we're at a point now here where we're running all our lights. We've got most of our lights along the house, but I got a section of only 4 lights over there. Well, I don't want to have to run wire all the way back around to those lights. So a question I always get asked is, well, can I tee into the line somewhere? Yes, absolutely you can, and that's what we're going to do here. And I'm going to show you how to do this. You can use this same principle if you're coming off of a transformer and you want to run a line that way and a line this way. You can tee at the bottom of the transformer too, but I'm going to show you how to go do that. So we've got our wire that's running across, and we've got our wire that we're going to send out to that new area. So same as before, we're going to split those wires, and then we're going to strip the ends of those, you know, again, roughly about 1 inch or so off the end of those. So that's our line that's going out to our 4 lights off in the distance. And then we've got our continuous line here that we're just going to cut into and we're going to make our T. So same thing, we're going to split. We're going to strip the ends off our line that's coming from our lights, and then we've got our line that's going to the rest of the lights. And then we've got our other line that's going to our other 4 lights. So now I got 3 sets of 12-2 wire. But we can't use these connectors now because we only got 2 holes for the 12-2 and we got a small hole for our fixture. So this is not going to work, so we can't use that. So what we're going to use is we're going to use these. We're going to use these DBRY connectors. Again, waterproof, gel filled. These are pretty much bulletproof once you get them installed. But now what we're going to do is we're going to tee in. So we've got 1 wire coming from our fixtures, 1 wire that's going out to our fixtures, and then we got that 3rd line now that's going out to our other set of fixtures. We're just going to twist all those together, and then we're going to throw our moret on there and twist those all together. And then we're going to take our tube that's full of gel, we're going to open that up. There's even slots for the moret that you can just slide it right on top, push it all the way to the end so that everything fills up so you're not going to get water in there, and then you just snap that tight and those wires are not coming out of there. And then you still got your three other sets of wires, or 2 other sets of wires here. We're going to go and we're going to put all those together. And the reason, again, that you can't do this with our little BVS2 connectors is because the 3 holes in there are not big enough to hold 3 of the 12 gauge wires. So we need to use a bigger connector. So again, we're going to twist all those together with our moret. We're going to open up our gel filled tube. We're going to push that into our tube, and then we're just going to snap that tight. And voila. So again, we've got our wires coming from our lights, going out to our lights on both ends. We've just teed into the line. You can use this at the base of the transformer too if you don't want to run 2 lines directly from the transformer, or maybe you have a transformer that doesn't have a terminal big enough to run 2 sets of wires. You can drop it down, tee it off to the front and the back, but you want to make sure you're using these connectors because they're going to be big enough to handle all the wires. Okay guys, so we've picked our lights. We know what size transformer we're going to use. We've placed all our lights. We've wired everything. Now we want to go and test it. And like I had mentioned in earlier videos, if you're new to the whole wiring process, it's a good idea to go maybe do this step first and then go and start wiring your lights so that you can turn your transformer on, and then you can test and make sure your lights are working as you go. But really simply, to go over it again, the transformer is basically what takes your power from your 120 volt in your house that you're going to plug this into and converts it to low voltage, which is what makes it so easy to go and put in this system. Again, if you're trying to select your transformer, you just want to make sure that it's about 20% larger than the total wattage of all your lights. So again, if we have 20 lights that are 5 watts each, that's 100 watts. So I want to make sure I have a transformer that's at least 120 watts or higher. You don't need to use a super big transformer. If you're using good quality LED lights, it doesn't matter if your transformer is 150 watts and you only have 60 watts of lights on it. That was more of a concern when you had halogen systems. You had to be very precise and very careful with how much power you were outputting to each light. The other thing you want to make sure of when you're selecting your transformer, the ones that we use are always good outdoor stainless steel ones. Try and stay away from anything that's plastic, just because sometimes they generate heat, and if they get too much heat, the plastic's going to wear out a lot sooner than a stainless steel one. The other thing you want to check for is you want to make sure that you have a 15 volt tap. Now, why would I have a 15 volt tap for 12 volt landscape lighting system? Well, again, if you're using a good landscape lighting system, most of those lights are designed to work anywhere from 10 to 15 volts. And why that's important is there's something called voltage drop. I'm not going to get into a bunch of that right now. Go search Lighting Doctor on YouTube, voltage drop, and I go through some videos and some charts on how to figure that out. But it's real simple. And a general rule of thumb, you can run up to 100 watts of lights on a 300-foot line of 12-2 low voltage wire without running into enough voltage drop to cause any issues. So why do you want to start at a 15 volt tap then? Because here now I start at 15 volts, which means if my lights will operate all the way down to 10 volts, then I can lose 5 volts along that whole line, which is why I can put so many lights on such a long run of wire. With halogen systems, you couldn't do that because you had to make sure every light operated between 11 and 12 volts, which means you had to use different terminals and all kinds of stuff like that. So a lot of you guys that have transformers that have multiple terminals, 14, 15, 12, 13 volts, that was designed more for halogen systems. You don't really have to worry about that. But starting with a 15 volt tap is very important. And again, super simple. I've got my 12-2 wire that I've split. All I got to do is I just got to go wire that into these terminals now. And again, there's no polarity. So it doesn't matter if there's writing on one and not on the other and how you wire them in the field. As long as each terminal and every light has 2 wires going to it, then you're not going to have a problem. But basically all you need to do is back these screws off. And then you're just going to go and push your wires up into those terminals. One in the common tap. Tighten that down, and then I'm going to put one in my 15 volt tap, tighten that down, and then you're basically good to go. Now you can go and test your lights. The transformer like this just has a simple on-off switch. Is a manual, but I'm going to tell you guys and show you guys how to go and control that with either a photocell or a smart timer. Okay guys, one of the last steps now is controlling your transformer. How do I go do that? Our transformer has a simple on-off switch. But you don't want to be coming out in the middle of the night flicking your transformer on and off. So 2 options. One, a simple option. I'm not a huge fan of photocells because they tend to fail, but it's basically going to read the sunlight and it's going to turn your lights on and off with dusk and dawn. Super easy to just basically plug into your transformer. And then there's a little cutout here that you just leave this out, and then it's going to read the sun and dawn and dusk settings, and it's going to turn your lights on and off for you. So that's a real simple way of doing it. But the only downside to that is you can't put your transformer inside, and you got to be careful that it's not in too shaded of a spot. What we like to use is a smart plug. Now this is the one that we use. This one's from Wion. It works great. It lasts outside. It's got an extra outlet too, so that if you wanted to go plug your Christmas lights in, you can do that, and you can all run it on the same app. So that's why I like this. I know that it works, but you can use any smart timer, and basically two options. You can either plug it inside the transformer or you can plug it outside the transformer. If you don't have great Wi-Fi, you might want to plug it outside the transformer. But if you're going to plug it in the transformer, you basically just take this plug out, plug your timer in there, and then you take this plug and you plug it back into your timer. And then you're gonna close that up in there, and then you're good to go. Download the app, go through the steps. You can still set dawn and dusk settings, so it just goes on with sunlight, but now it's gonna use your geographic location as opposed to having a photocell that has to read the sun. But you can also have up to 5 other timer options with the smart timer. That's why I like it. You can turn your lights on and off from anywhere. It's a great option. If you don't have great Wi-Fi and you can't put it inside the box because maybe it's not reading it, well, it's pretty simple. You can just go plug it into the wall, into your outlet, and then your plug that's coming off your transformer, you just plug that into your timer, you plug that into the wall, leave this in the on position, and then everything's gonna run through your timer. So again, if you have a smart system and you already have smart plugs, well, then you can just go plug your transformer into that, leave this in the on position, and then you can operate it on the same platform that you already have. And that's a simple way to go and make your transformer a smart transformer. Okay guys, and the last step, you know, we've done it in the beds, we've kept it along the edge. Sometimes we'll have to go across the grass. This is the one area you want to get it a little bit deeper. You want to make sure that it's not going to get hit by an aerator or anything like that if you have to run the wire through the grass. But again, as much as possible, try and keep it to the edges. But all we use is a simple flat spaded shovel. And basically all I'm doing is I'm cutting a little slit in the grass and kind of flicking that up. We used to do this a lot with irrigation too, where I can get about 8 inches deep. I can flick that grass up just enough so that I can tuck either my pipe or my wire in there. And then all I'm gonna go do is I'm gonna go and I'm gonna slide my wire into that crack now. And that's where our, I used to call it a wire poker, but now I've learned it's a weed puller tool you can go get at any home and garden aisle of any home improvement store. And it's great because now I can push that wire nice and deep down in the grass. Whereas if I didn't have this, I got to try and flip this up. And depending on what kind of lawn you have, that can be a lot of work. But once you get that down there, pretty simple. Go pack that down. And then within a couple days, you're not even going to see that anymore. Your wire's buried, your lights are in, your system's complete. You've taken some pictures, you've sent them back to me so that we can look and see how everything goes, make any recommendations. I hope you guys learned a ton about how to go install your low voltage landscape lighting system. If you need more help, go to lightingdoctor.ca, check out all our videos, take advantage of our free consultation, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and keep learning. Thanks guys for watching.